Look around. See the dissent. Hear the voices roaring for change. The passionate activists. The rebel media personalities. The NGOs with their righteous missions. All seemingly fighting the good fight against the powers that be. It feels like resistance, doesn't it? It feels like the pushback we need. But what if I told you a significant part of that resistance is illusion, a carefully constructed theater, that many of the loudest voices condemning the worst parts of our society and our system are actually funded by those same entities that they are supposedly opposing? What happens if I told you that they are housed by said same entities, permitted by them precisely because they serve its ultimate purpose? Think about it. The 501c3 nonprofit structurally designed to be non-threatening, accept donations, stay tax exempt, but never truly engage the deep structures. They become fire breaks. They channel genuine outrage into acceptable avenues, endless studies, harmless petitions, awareness campaigns that change nothing fundamental. They constantly have demonstrations. They constantly state outrage. They absorb energy like a sponge. They leave the foundation of the apparatus of the same oppression that they are supposed to be opposing utterly unchanged. And the media personalities, the ones branded as contrarian or edgy, the supposed watchdogs, how many are groomed, platformed and amplified because their opposition is predictable or because it is impotent, because it is manageable. They rail against the symptoms, easy targets, cultural flashpoints, while scrupulously avoiding the disease root system itself. They become controlled lightning rods, directing public fury into safe, controlled dead-end corridors. Funded by the very corporations and governments and religions and cults, and supposedly they are monitoring them, but they are in fact being monitored by them. Their existence often depends on maintaining a delicate dance, loud enough to seem credible, never effective enough to disrupt the real flow of power and profit. They provide plausible deniability. See, the system says we allow criticism, we support dialogue while the machine grinds on, untruly challenged. This is controlled opposition. It's not always a sinister conspiracy meeting in dark rooms. Often it's the natural outcome of a system designed to absorb and neutralize threats. It offers the illusion of resistance. It offers the illusion of recourse. It gives the angry and the hopeful a place to vent, to feel like they're doing something, to feel like they did what they had to do. They passed the information to the right authorities, but those authorities aren't actually meant to pursue the truth or to pursue justice. They're meant to protect the people they are meant to protect. While the real levers of control remain firmly in the grasp of the same entrenched interests, it makes dissent safe for the status quo because it disarms all of us. It makes our most potent weapons, genuine, unco-opted outrage, manageable directly by the very systems that impose an intolerable situation. It keeps us fighting phantoms and one another, distracted by the puppets while the puppeteers operate unseen. It breeds cynicism. Nothing ever changes, when the truth is the right kind of change is being ruthlessly prevented. Using critical points, critical individuals. Over and over again, these YouTubers that are so passionate about these things have no interest in actually doing anything about them. Their function is merely to exist as outrage porn, but not to actually provide solutions, and certainly not to functionally seek them. So the next time you see a voice of dissent, ask yourself who funds them, who platforms them, what lines do they never cross, what structures do they never fundamentally question. Does their fight actually change anything, or just manage the discontent? True opposition terrifies the powerful. Controlled opposition is their comfort food. Stop consuming the illusion. Start seeing the strings. This is my introduction. Now we're going to segue into the formal part of the episode, because I realized I had written this, I couldn't find it, and when I did, I wanted to use it. So I think it's the right introduction, it's the right move, and hopefully it'll be a little funny with this. This should be a really weird transition, I'm thinking, but okay. Welcome to the Fort Huron statement once again. Today we are going to talk about controlled opposition. I call this one the gatekeepers, how controlled opposition protects the most appalling of actors in the system. Ad-libbing the title, I don't know. I think it's pretty good though, right? So, we just talked about learned helplessness and gaslighting and gang stalking. So these things all come hand in hand. How control systems keep people trapped through psychological manipulation. Today is multifaceted, and the probably most insidious mechanism of social control is controlled opposition. For the individuals that are especially adamant and won't be kept helpless, the ones starting to ask questions, gather evidence, and connect dots, for those people, this social exploitation system that is particularly evident locally provides what appears to be legitimate outlets for concerns. Journalists, whistleblower organizations, truth-telling podcasters, etc. But these outlets are often not designed to actually do anything, but actually to contain it. So, what is controlled opposition? It's when the same people who run a corrupt system also find a way to influence and run the very organization and individuals that publicly appear to be fighting against it. This is not a new concept. Governments and other institutions have been doing this for centuries. If you think about it strategically, if you're running a criminal enterprise or any enterprise that has activities which are not not those which you would like to be publicly known, eventually some people are going to figure out what those things are, or what you're doing that you're trying to keep hidden. It's impossible to silence everyone, and if you try, it becomes too obvious. So what's the most logical conclusion? You create organizations and you manipulate individuals that look like they're on the side of your opposition, the people that are trying to expose you for what you're actually doing. They manipulate the promise to help expose the truth, or to get results to alleviate the injustices that are being observed or being imposed. And so these victims end up being validated, and they need a source of guidance, and so creating controlled opposition entities also allows for people to gain closure and feel as though they've done what they can and what they need to do. So like filing a tip on a website or a agency site that is never actually going to go anywhere, because it's not so much what the crime is, it's who is committing it that is most relevant. So what does controlled opposition achieve? It gathers intelligence on who knows what. It ultimately wastes people's time. They spend a bunch of time divulging what they know and their strategies to someone that's complicit with the very people that are oppressing them. And in addition, their time is intentionally wasted. So it's a good way to allow people to vent but not actually achieve anything. Then also the controlled opposition functions as an excellent mechanism of discrediting sincere and authentic whistleblowers whenever they start to gain traction, because these people start to sort of symbolize their causes, so they can use that platform to discredit sincere efforts to realize change. And the most significant thing is controlling the narrative. So while validating people's concerns, they're also minimizing the ultimate effect of the injustice by steering the narrative into one of apparent motion and effort, but not any actual change. It's ultimately a gatekeeping function as well. Let's say you've discovered evidence of serious corruption, maybe financial fraud, maybe child trafficking, maybe intelligence agency misconduct. You're looking for help, for someone with a platform who can amplify your voice. You reach out to investigative journalists, activist organizations, whistleblower protection groups, and here's where the gatekeeping function begins to be obvious. The initial response test: a legitimate journalist or activist, when contacted by a potential source, responds with interest and professionalism. Even if they're skeptical, they ask probing questions because uncovering truth is literally their job. But controlled opposition has a different response pattern. The more legitimate the information potentially is, the more immediate dismissal is utilized, or trivialization. That sounds like conspiracy theory. Personal attacks: you sound unstable, you need therapy, do you have mental health issues? You would never be a legitimate investigative journalist that was able to uncover deeply concealed entities by responding by gaslighting potential sources. It will never happen. Deflection: have you tried the police, knowing full well, even in their own material, that the police themselves are often compromised, though? False enthusiasm followed by obstruction. This is common, where someone will be supportive and encouraging, but again lead to nothing. So there's some good examples of this. I guess I'll use this one, which is John DeCamp and Alicia Owen, which is pretty famous with the Franklin scandal. And then there's the moving the goalpost strategy, which is continually utilized not just by this sort of functor in this system, but across the board. And this moving the goalpost system of psychological manipulation deserves and will get its own episode. But if initial dismissal doesn't work, they'll engage with you but set impossible standards. Do you have evidence? You provide evidence. This isn't enough evidence, you provide more evidence. This isn't the right kind of evidence, you provide different types of evidence. You need official documentation, you provide this official documentation. The documentation could be fake. You provide verification of authenticity. Even if this is true, it's not newsworthy. Or, my favorite one I got was, this is politically untenable. You wouldn't believe. And you know what? I don't need them. Anyway, See the pattern, the goalposts keep moving, because the goal isn't to evaluate your evidence, it's to exhaust you, waste your time, and make you feel as though what you have isn't significant enough, so keep you running in the wheel. And then, obviously, the other major functor of a controlled opposition entity or operation is the gathering of information. So, a lot of times, the controlled opposition will function as a mechanism of exposing truth, but it will be done in a way where that truth is coming out no matter what, and so it's going to happen so that they can isolate the individuals that are clearly unrecoverable, and save the rest of the system. So it's a patsy system, or an amputation type thing, and that's what happens with Epstein. If you look, it doesn't even take that hard to find out that he was working with the Mossad, and so he was trading secrets about U.S. politicians to the Mossad, which has given Israel an enormous amount of leverage over the United States, but that's a whole other thing. But yeah, while gathering intelligence, the controlled opposition, what they'll learn about you is what evidence you have and where you got it, so then they can go after your sources, intimidate them if they're people or whatever, try and find the actual evidence if it's physical, destroy it if it's digital. Again, find out who they are, and the best thing is to intimidate them into changing their story. If it's a person, how much you know about their operation, what your strategies might be, what your next steps might be, who else you're talking to, who else is on your side, who in their organization might be compromised, and what your talents and psychological profile might be. So what your potential weaknesses are, what your past is like, so they can try and exploit that against you, etc., etc., etc. What they learn about their own system is also interesting, because this is critical, and this is what, this part you can use to your own advantage, but they'll learn what security vulnerabilities need to be plugged, which people in the organization might be talking, which operations might need to be shut down or modified, which cover stories aren't working, and what portions of the whole need to be abandoned, and how to do that with plausible deniability for the rest of the system. Why Epstein died in that jail cell. Because he thought he was getting out for sure, because, the threat of him talking was too great to be tolerated, which was true. Thus is the problem with, and that's why you keep all these files, why Trump keeps looking for files, and then Biden's always looking for files. That's okay. Anyway, the heroic journalist. So this is a veneer that will be presented by a controlled opposition. They'll build a reputation for exposing corruption, getting results, but notice their targets. They expose corruption that's already been exposed. They'll focus on corruption that doesn't threaten the core power structure. When they do expose something significant, nothing happens. No arrests, no policy changes, no real consequences. They have surprisingly good access to inside sources and specific entities and government agencies, and their biggest scoops often serve to discredit other researchers who are getting too close. So they create an adversarial relationship with other individuals with the same goals. The brave activist organization that raise money to fight the very problems they help perpetuate, massive fundraising operations, but limited actual results or any even documentation of what the means of realizing those results are. I mean, we can go through a bunch of local charities. They focus on symptoms rather than root causes. They never seem to identify the same networks that independent researchers discover. They have inexplicable access to mainstream media platforms, and their investigations consistently exonerate the very people who should be the primary subjects or focus of said investigations. And then they'll receive and reveal shocking information that serves specific purposes. The revelations create public outrage, but don't ultimately result in any meaningful change. The information disclosed is carefully selected and edited to avoid exposing broader networks. They become media celebrities, which is very uncommon for genuine whistleblowers. The revelations often serve to discredit other potential sources, and they have surprisingly good legal protection and media support, despite their apparent grassroots or minimum budget facade. How to identify controlled opposition? Once you know it's out there and you know what to look for, controlled opposition becomes obvious. Economic indicators: follow the money. Funding sources: who pays their salaries, who funds their organizations. How do they actually make money? Is it sustainable? Do they make money? Is it self-funded? Are they open about their funding sources? Do they spend more on self-promotion or on investigation? What kind of results have they realized? How do they behave? Do they treat potential sources with respect or hostility? Do they follow evidence wherever it leads or avoid certain topics? Do they work with other independent researchers or only with people in their network? Do their investigations lead to meaningful change or just more investigations and allegations? Look at their connections. Who promotes them? Which mainstream media outlets give them platforms? Are they close with collaborators that may be suspicious? Do they spend more time attacking other researchers than the alleged perpetrators? How do they get their positions? What's their background? Now, at the same time, there are a diverse ways that you can get to become deeply invested in something like legitimate activist work, but at the same time, there is significance to the context with which you operate, which is to say that not everyone is their past, but people's past does give context as to their present. In part 6, the psychological warfare aspect. Controlled opposition isn't just about containing information, it's about a psychological warfare against anyone who threatens the system or learns how it ultimately maintains control and manufactures consent. By pretending to be allies and then betraying your trust, controlled opposition will make you paranoid about reaching out to anyone else, and will make you suspicious of journalism at large. You start to think, even if the people who are supposed to be on my side are working against me, who can I trust? This is a profoundly impactful outcome of recognizing that you have entrusted a controlled operator, and most people will never get to that point because the psychological consequence is too great. They would rather just assume good faith and continue to trust someone despite growing evidence that they can't, which is something that we need to change. And I guess the first step in changing it is offering people outlets that they can trust. Gaslighting is a common mechanism that's used in all of these avenues. They make you question your own perceptions and evidence. Are you sure that what you saw is real? Have you considered that maybe you might be misinterpreting this? Maybe you should talk to someone about these thoughts. Maybe you need therapy. No one that is in legitimate journalism will ever respond with allegations of your psychological unhingedness, regardless of what you tell them. That isn't the purpose of a journalist's function. And if everything is being presented logically and in a clear manner, then that is a obvious controlled opposition move. I mean, if you're presenting things well, and because of the complexity and the emotionally charged nature of the way people get manipulated in the society, can and is meant to promote a behavior response which can be depicted as schizophrenia or psychosis. But at the same time, if you are presenting these arguments clearly, logically, rationally, and actually stoically or objectively or unemotionally, and you're getting that response, that is just a smoking gun. No one would gaslight a potential source. Would never happen if they're legitimate journalists. Anyway. Yeah, and then the other one is the guilty by association, discreditation techniques. So using your past against you to say that you're uncredible, or lumping you in with or introducing you to people that are clearly not like legitimate, that there are actually psychotic people and paranoid schizophrenics, and like what's sad is that the reality of the social situation does not help their situation. A lot of these people actually are victims that are just trying to make sense of their victimization. And they've been intentionally fed nonsense wrapped in truth, wrapped in nonsense, wrapped in truth so many times over that, it's hard to make sense of anything. And this is why it's important to be informed about how you can be and are potentially and are actually being manipulated. Because if you're not aware of those things, then you are very vulnerable to severe symptomatic responses to those attempts. But the differences between real and fake opposition, which means that how do you tell the difference between someone who is insincerely positioning themselves as a whistleblower activist or some type of opposition to an existing injustice or institutional injustice? I'm going to use injustice twice. I should be like a synonym, but I couldn't. Anyway, legitimate opposition tactics legitimate opposition characteristics. Real opposition typically has limited resources and struggles for funding in the more... Yeah, that's true. The Intercept, the Atlantic, I can think of. Even some of the smaller little papers, the Village Voice, faces real consequences for their work, lawsuits, harassment, career damage. NPR's Nina Totenberg, with, who is she burned by? I forget what that one was. Builds coalition with other independent researchers, so you'll notice a strong tendency towards cooperation, takes personal risks rather than building celebrity status, so usually will protect their sources at all costs and seek to offer a shield to the people that are informing them, and try to draw attention to the issues rather than themselves. Produces actionable intelligence that threatens powerful interests, so usually they'll be able to make some change or at least create meaningful revelations. And there are personalities in journalism and legitimate activism that are all across the board, but I'm not calling out anyone in particular here. Red flags for controlled opposition: has suspiciously good access to informed individuals, platforms, has no real consequences for exposing powerful people. They seem to be somehow protected, unlike legitimate activists who usually get jailed or at least come under pressure to reveal sources, attacks other resources or other researchers, creates adversarial relationships with people in the same avenue or trying to reach the same goals. Often creates an unnecessary amount of drama within their truth-seeking communities, creating dissension, tribalism, and distracting from the overall goals. They may promote helplessness and say that things like what you have is invaluable, or you're not going to be able to contribute, or the system is too powerful to change, or they will steer you away from certain topics, or say that that's not going to be fruitful, or get a blah blah blah. Like any time that they try and steer you away from something, then it's a big red flag. I would just say that there's a lot of steps to dealing with the profound amount of controlled opposition in the media right now, and I guess we're at a point now where, gosh, you can almost, the best thing is to be skeptical, assume everything is compromised, try and verify things with good sourcing, but operate under the assumption of it is and it isn't at the same time, which means to say that if you assume and extrapolate and deduce both scenarios that you're presented with, that what you're being told is accurate, or who you're dealing with is operating good faith, and then also assume that the opposite is true, and try and make your moves as wisely as you can under both assumptions. When you're in a situation that has a high probability of being compromised, like what I'm saying, if you're engaging in any whistleblowing activities, then assume that who you're dealing with is compromised and also not compromised, which means to say protect yourself, but also don't assume that everyone's compromised. And if you would like, you can always email me or contact me, and I do actually know people that are not controlled opposition that are interested in most of these things. So, abiento.